I often just leave these mics on because I clip this off anyway when it finally goes up on YouTube to live. But we're live. I'll mute you. I'll mute me. And when you see the countdown happen, that's when we're about to go. Hello to you on Facebook. We'll be doing the countdown in just a minute and then we will be kicking off. So just cool your heels. Make sure, have you got a coffee or something? Make sure you do. Greetings on YouTube as well. Nice to see you. We'll just give an opportunity for the they're coming in now. That's great. YouTube and Twitch and Facebook. Just hold on. We're just waiting for people to get their notifications and jump in. Then I'll run the countdown and then we'll be off and running. Off to the races, as they say at this time of the year. Hope you had a great weekend and all that stuff. I hope you've caught up on my exciting news. Oh, we've got a comment. Hi, Mon. Very good. Michael, I know you can hear me. Mon's driving back from where she had to leave her car, which means that we're going to be the road trip music. So the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, I don't know. That's what the bird emergency is today. All right, let's run the countdown and we can get into it. G'day, bird nerds. I'm Grant. I'm sure you already know that. I'm a bird nerd. This is the Bird Emergency, where we get to talk about rare and endangered birds and what is going on. What can we do? Look at that. Ellen, you just hang on there too. I'll bring you in just a minute. Today, I'm joined by a couple of people. You just heard me get surprised. Ellen Rykers from Forest and Bird in New Zealand has joined in. We have the Bird of the Year announcement. I've deliberately, no, Barb. I just looked at a comment, Ellen. I have actually let's just do the whole thing. Let's just do the whole thing. Michael's in. I'm in. Oh, take that out. And Alan's in. Hi, Alan.
Kia ora, hello.
Michael, Alan's in New Zealand. Alan,
Hi,
you're going to have to put up with a little bit of GangGang Cockatoo talk before we talk Kiwi birds.
That's all good. I did live in Canberra for 5 years, so I love a
Oh,
gang. Yeah.
gang. Well, that's great. I'm glad you can join in on that. Ellen, I had deliberately not gone to the website. I deliberately didn't want to know who had won. I just looked in the comments and somebody told me.
Someone spoiled it.
Someone has told me, but we'll keep that as a surprise. Michael, welcome to the Bird Emergency.
Thank you, Grant.
You're involved in a community group, so we're going to call you a community activist, polite shit stirrer, I'm sure.
Not so polite.
Oh, good. Well, you'll fit right in because I reckon the time for being polite and waiting for stuff to happen is well and truly past, and we need to be shaking shelves and kicking ankles and biting and screaming. Oh, I have to also say those Twitter handles that I have above my head. That's the Queensland Minister for the Environment, the Queensland Deputy Premier, and he's also the Minister for Planning, and the Federal Minister for the Environment. Alan, I don't know if you know, there's a development that is proposed for the shores of Moreton Bay, which is one of the places that far eastern curlews regularly arrive and overwinter. You know, it's their summer and feeding ground and whatnot. And they want to put about I think it's 70 or more residential flats and medium density housing on it. Nutso. So I want people to go hashtag Toondah, TOONDAH, and let these bozos know what's going on. Michael, did you ever see a slender-billed curlew?
I have seen. Oh, yes, I was counting.
No, a slender-billed curlew, really?
Oh, no, a eastern curlew, sorry, yeah.
I was going to say, because guess what? Slender-billed curlew just nominated as extinct. Eskimo curlew, once one of the most common birds on North America, extinct. Eurasian curlew, under threat of becoming extinct. Far Eastern curlew, critically endangered. It's time to stop. All right, Michael, should I play the video so that we all know how cool gang-gangs are, and then we'll talk about the regenerators? Okay.
Yeah, let it rip.
Enjoy this, folks. Okay. Now, that's an amazing call, isn't it, Michael?
Well, yeah, amazing is one word for it. It's pretty harsh.
I've always really liked it, and it's described mostly as a squeaky gate, but for me, it's always reminded me of the difficult corkscrew being difficult cork being removed from the bottle of Cab Sav or something. It's the squeaky cork.
Yeah, look, if you've been watching Gang Gangs as long as I have, you realise that they've actually got quite a complex language, and there's got quite a few calls. And actually, when they're angry, looking down a hollow and there's a possum in the hollow or a sulphur-crested cockatoo, they have this really deep growl, and they sort of push their wings out, expand their size, and down the hollow. So, and then when they're both the male and female take it in turns to sit on the eggs, and when they're changing over, they have a really soft little call to say, "Here I come, I'm coming in," and it's just this little and that's it. And another type of call is basically when they're sitting up eating. Quite often they won't say anything, but they will just sort of chat amongst themselves. So, their harsh call it's really that squeaky gate is usually when they're flying through the landscape and they're keeping in contact with each other. So yeah, learn some gang languages and listen to them.
What I thought was great about that video, and that's Tim Siggs on YouTube, by the way, and he's been making videos and taking photos of birds since he was 12, and that was 15 or 16 years ago. So good on you, Tim. I hope you don't mind that I pinched that, but I did give all the credit and everything. So, we're sharing the love. But that gang was feeding on acacia seeds. But most of us, certainly in my experience of seeing gangs, except in the one case where they used to visit the garden that I lived in, is they're doing this. They're feasting on hawthorns, or maybe I'm not sure exactly what that one is. It might have been an apple or
a pear.
Yeah, a pear, or
ornamental pear.
Or locusts, cotoneasters.
Yeah, that looks like a pistachio, that one.
Yeah, a pistachio, or maybe a amelia. But yeah, so you generally see them feasting on introduced berry plants.
Because actually we're a land carer, Red Hill, it's actually the gang capital of the world in terms of number of nesting sites. We were interested in what gangs were eating. So we asked people to put on either iNaturalist, or there's another platform called Canberra Nature Map, anytime they saw a gang eating, and we went through social media, and we had 4,135 records of gangs eating. And if you'd multiply the numbers of gangs in those images, there was 6,700 feeding events. And the proportions of what they were eating, that they're actually like us. They like to eat from a range of food groups, and 43% of the time they were eating eucalypt, guns, and nuts. 21% of the time they were eating those berries, and they weren't just exotic berries, but they were natives, particularly around the Sydney area. They would get into petunias, or in that video you showed, they're actually eating coastal wattles, but you can see a devil's twine in amongst it, which is another native seed that they eat. So that was 21% on the berries. And then they spent 10% of their time eating mainly green cones of introduced cypresses, but also native calitris. 7.5% of their time was feeding wattles, and it was mainly green pods, but that was pretty much only in the breeding season. They would also eat soft pods, mainly liquid amber, occasionally eat nuts and invertebrates. The most unusual thing that we had them eating was a roadkill magpie, or parsley in someone's backyard. So all up, we had them eating 275 different food items. So they have a pretty varied diet.
That's pretty amazing. I'm not surprised that they are getting it carrion, because My personal experiences, I used to live at a place where I looked over Lake Reeve and at the dune that separated, the Gippsland Lakes from the 90 Mile Beach, from that edge of Bass Strait. And I used to get galahs, sulphur-crested cockatoos, rainbow lorikeets, crimson and eastern rosellas regularly, and I was feeding on a upturned hubcap, as many of us do, on a lovely balcony. And occasionally yellow-tailed black cockatoos would come in and they would follow the fruiting bodies up and down the national park and the state park along the Gippsland Lakes. But occasionally gang-gangs would come in and they would never come to the feed. They would never come to the sunflower seeds or anything. I would see them attacking. It's the Mount Morgan wattle. That was my horticulture brain is letting me down. I can't even remember what the species name is, but Mount Morgan wattle and a stringy bark, a really big mature stringy bark. And funnily enough, David, you said Petunia. I had a Petunia that they would just rip apart. But in Melbourne, I've only ever seen them on introduced plants, usually hawthorns. They love hawthorns and they love cotoneasters.
So we did find that what they eat does vary from region to region. And in Melbourne, they did eat the biggest proportion of hawthorns than anywhere else. But actually, the plant that they mainly fed on in Melbourne was sugar gum, which is it's a non-local eucalypt to the Melbourne area, but it's a popular planting. So they are, pretty adaptable. 26% of their food items were exotic plants. So it does suggest that they can adapt to new food sources. So we're suspecting that food availability is not such an issue for them because they've got such a wide diet and they can vary from city to city. The plants they're targeting are different. So in Canberra, it's blue gums. In Melbourne, it's sugar gums. And up in the Blue Mountains, it's Sydney peppermints. So, yeah.
Ellen, I don't want you just to be sitting there nodding away, but you said you lived in Canberra for a while. Did you have many close-up experiences with the gang-gangs?
Yeah, a few. I think my first one was actually down on the south coast at Green Patch in Jarvis Bay. And I remember seeing this bird and being like, oh my gosh, what is that with that sort of fluffy hair, fluffy crest? And then there were definitely a pair that sort of hung around the hall that I lived in on the university campus. And I've seen them on Mount Ainslie and sort of around Ainslie when I lived there. So it was always a highlight when you heard that squeaky gate call and sort of looked around to see where they might be. So, yeah.
Oh, so an ANU graduate, fantastic.
Yes, yeah.
What did you do at ANU?
My undergraduate was in chemistry. But I've always been interested in birds since I was a little kid. And so by the time I was getting towards the end of my degree, I realized I liked talking and writing about science and environment and wildlife more than being stuck in a lab. So I kind of switched into science communication.
Cool. SciComm. Oh, there's a whole lot to talk about there. We'll probably talk to you a lot more in the future about that. Michael, is the gang food record study still going on?
No, I've basically finished that, but we're uncertain whether people feeding gang-gangs is a good thing or a bad thing or a neutral thing. They really love sunflower seeds and they'll just feast on sunflower seeds. And for caged birds that are fed just on sunflower seeds, they do develop health problems. They become infertile, they get skeleton. But whether it affects wild birds, we don't know. So we are asking people to contact us that are feeding gang-gangs in the Canberra area But also, when you look at gang-gangs, they don't just feed at one place. They, guts at one house and then go down the one down the street, and then they fly to the next block. So we're trying to work out, well, how far do they travel to get feed? And amongst gang-gangs, there are some pretty recognisable characters. So we've got on Canberra Nature Map a gallery of recognisable gang-gangs, who includes Baldy, who's lost his crest, and Pie, she's lost her eye. Peg has got a peg leg, and Gold Feather has this gold feather on the back of his nest, and White Eye has a white eye. So we're asking people to look out for those and to record when they see them. So at least we'll know how often they're actually going to one place to be fed. Does the same bird come to the same house every day? And how far do they travel? We know from reports we've got from Baldy that he raised 2 young last year, and he travelled up to 4 kilometres to feed on a red stringy bark gum nut, and in return, when he was feeding his young, he also travelled 1.5 kilometres to feed on an Italian cypress pine, and he travelled 1 kilometre every second day to basically tap on the window of this person and say, "Hey, I'm here, get your sunflower seeds out," and then he'd go back and feed his young. So we're continuing that study at the moment. So if people can look out for those distinctive birds, we'll get some sort of indication, and then we'll be able to design one. Well, how much sunflower seed is a gang-gang eating, and is it an issue or not? Or could it? We've been doing studying of nest sites, so our group's actually found most of the nest sites across Australia, and most of them are actually within 250 metres of an urban edge. So why are they choosing to nest near houses? Now, is it because they're going in the backyard and hoeing into those exotic plantings that you mentioned before, like the Melias and the pistachios? Or could seed feeding be really advantageous to raising chicks? So, we're trying to work that out, but we haven't got much of a clue at the moment.
Never let an opportunity to do some cross promotion go by. We did tackle feeding native birds a couple of times during the pandemic, to feed or not to feed. If you look on the YouTube, or I'm pretty sure it's on thebirdemergency.com/live, where we talked to Dr. David Phelan, and it was sort of in connection with the lorikeet paralysis disease that had been popping up. But I'd been feeding my local birds regularly in the park with a mixture of seeds. And I think we came down on, in the end, the birds don't need to be fed, so don't feed them. But if you are going to feed them in a way that means they need to be challenged to get the feed, that they will be naturally grazing, for want of a much better term, but they'll be fossicking, looking for food rather than coming to a big plate like they're gouging themselves on a cheesy pizza. Because, I mean, we've got beak and feather disease, which is a problem. We've got avian influenza, which luckily we're not seeing here yet, but I doubt very much that it won't be here. So we probably don't want birds in that sort of close proximity to each other where their heads are all diving into one small bowl. So, yeah, go back and check that out if you're interested. I no longer feed the birds, but I do go out and look at them every day. And interestingly enough, the little corellas rarely come in, but the other birds still come in, but not in the flock that they used to. They're still around, but they're not coming to see me every day. They do still visit, and they demand, they sit on the fence and they screech and they carry on. One sulphur-crested cockatoo and one long-billed corella have learnt where my door is, and they will, if they see me outside, they'll follow me and they'll walk up and wait. It's a disappointing wait for them now.
Yeah, look, I think you can feed. You probably mentioned in your show that you can feed in a hygienic way. And look, I used to be quite strident about not feeding gang-gangs, and I'd be speaking to a room of 100 people, and I'd look out, and no one was making eye contact with me. I realised everyone out there was feeding gang-gangs, and you can't underestimate what a force that is for good in terms of getting people on side for bird conservation. So I'm in two minds, but I would like to get some data on it if I am going to tell people don't feed gang-gangs.
There's a couple of particular points for that. One is that my local community, who probably didn't give a shit about birds, full stop, got introduced to these amazing birds. They were seeing them come in every day, and all the kids were having a great time being in close proximity, not only to cockatoos but to corellas, which they probably weren't that familiar with, and long-billed corellas are real characters. But there's maybe a particular argument to feed gang-gangs at the moment, Michael, because so much of their habitat, which is why they're now listed as endangered, estimated population of between 17,600 and 35,200, Cameron et al. 2021, is their population, but so much of their natural range was burnt out in our grotesque summer of bushfires.
Yeah, it's estimated 30% was burnt out, and that perhaps 10% of the population was killed in those fires. But they're quite a widespread bird. They go from Newcastle, basically, if you follow the Hume Highway inland, all the way around to Victoria, all the way around to the Victorian South Australian border, and there's an introduced population on Kangaroo Island that's pretty small. But, it's quite a big habitat. It is Australia's only cool temperate cockatoo, so it is up in those cooler areas. But, it's a bit uncertain why its population has declined so dramatically, because that habitat hasn't declined as dramatically as it has.
Can I throw in a suggestion? I'm guessing, Michael, we're of a similar vintage. Now, I've lived in southern Victoria most of my life, and I lived on Mornington Peninsula and eastern parts. I didn't see a long-billed Corella east of Portland until about 10 years ago. Now they're everywhere. I didn't see little Corellas until you went over the Great Dividing Range. They were a dry country bird, a bit like the crested pigeon. Crested pigeons everywhere here, but when I was a kid, they weren't in Melbourne. They certainly weren't in the eastern suburbs, in the wetter, suburbs. Maybe over here in St Albans, where I am, they might have been. So the competition for nesting hollows with all those Corellas, just for one, has got to be massively intense. And rainbow lorikeets, I'm expecting, are ganging up and driving them out.
That's what the wisdom says, but we put it to the test, and we didn't come up with that answer. We're citizen science based. 6 years ago, I knew nothing about gang-gang, so you do have to say what I say with a grain of salt. But we asked people to record when they saw a gang-gang entering a hollow or perched on the edge and looking into a hollow. And we had over 900 sightings of gang-gangs mucking around hollows. Now, we prioritised those, and we used a plumber's endoscope on a pole to actually look into the hollows, and we looked into just over 200 of the hollows that gang-gangs had shown interest in. And of those hollows, they actually nested in 9%, but almost half of the hollows were completely empty, so there was nothing in them. 10% were flooded, and actually gang-gangs have drinking trees, which they go to get their water source from. Hollows hold water really well, and you can have a metre depth of water inside a eucalypt hollow. And only in 4% of those 200 hollows did we look in was there another cockatoo or parrot. And that included corellas, sulphur-crested, rainbow lorikeets. Now, that was just in Canberra. So we're trying to repeat that work elsewhere because our gang-gangs are steady in Canberra and elsewhere they're declining. So that might be a reason. But recently I was down in Melbourne, and I only looked in 25 hollows, but again, half of those were empty. Lorikeets were more common, so that may be a factor. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure, and certainly it's just a suspicion about that competition. There's just no data out there. In fact, there's very little research that's been done on the gang-gang at all, which is why, you know, a land care group like ours has had to sort of take the lead on a lot of those areas of research.
Well, let's before we lose you, David, let's talk about the Red Hill reforestation or restoration project. Give us the blurb.
So Red Hill is that everybody sees it almost every night. It's that ridge you see behind Parliament House when they're talking about Canberra and the politicians. And I've been active trying to restore boxgum woodland, which is a critically endangered vegetation type, on the hill with about 100 others for 35 years. And much to my shame, I would see gang-gangs on the hill, but I actually never realised they were nesting there until part of the hill we had a development proposal, and one of our members, she came and said, "Oh, I think there's gang-gangs nesting in there." And we staked it out, and sure enough, there was a gang-gang nest. And we wondered, oh, can we use this to stop the development? And how important is the gang-gang nest? So we did a bit of research. This was back in 2017. And at that time, there was only one other gang-gang known nest in the whole of Australia. It's just incredible when you say that. You just think people didn't know that. So, yeah, we've begun the research of how to look after the gang-gang and just how important a nesting hollow was, because most of the work on its nesting ecology was from birds within aviary. It wasn't from wild observations. So again, I think we've had over 3,000 people assist us in our research through responding to our calls for information. And so we've actually found now about 65 gang-gang nests, of which 54 of those are within Canberra, and the 11 others are basically Sydney, Tumbarumba, Cooma, Melbourne, and near Dalesford, and Maria and Durras are the more recent ones. So we are starting to put a story together about the gang-gang and how it nests, and yeah, I've been quoting some of that work to you.
So, Michael, do you want people who are not necessarily in the Canberra area to be feeding information to you as well, or is...
Yeah, particularly we're still getting that nesting work going, and we particularly want to look at what's happening in the nest outside of the Canberra area. So if people can take a photo when they see a gang-gang in and around a hollow and put that on iNaturalist, or send it to Red Hill Regenerators if that's too big an issue to do. But it's pretty easy to put things on iNaturalist. So yeah, that's what I'd recommend. And there's a project there called Gang-gang Nesting Hollows, but I get an alert every time someone puts a gang-gang image on iNaturalist, so I'm always checking them out. The breeding season, they're actually pretty quiet when they're breeding. So just before the breeding season is the best chance of seeing where they're likely to be nesting. And depending on where you are in Australia, because there's 2 months between breeding up at high altitudes and low altitudes, so they breed early at the low altitudes. But August, September, October are the best times for looking. The next best time is just before the chicks fledge, they actually come to the top of the hollow and you get to see them. But that's only about a week. And again, depending on when you are, that's mid-December to the end of February. So, yeah, keep your eyes out. And where you see those gang-gangs looking into hollows, or particularly if you see chicks perched at the lip of a hollow, we'd really like to see those photos.
And Michael, have you been referring to Erica Roper's Hungry Parrots project as well? And
yeah, so that was one of the platforms we used for the diet study. And look, people can still put records on that, but I'm not collating them. But someone down the track will have instead of 4,135 records, they'll have all the new ones put up there, so it'll actually be a better record than what we used.
That'll great. So if you've got gang-gangs in your area, Red Hill. Oh, I've missed an L out, haven't I? There, in my haste. Red Hill with a double L. Regenerators.org.au. Oh. That's what happens when you do things on the fly.
Yeah. Well, I'm dyslexic, so I didn't pick it up.
Oh, well, I didn't until I was just going to read it out. So yeah, I'll drop that off. Michael, I know you have to nick off in a minute or two. So, is there anything else that people really need to know about gang-gangs? We did get the question there, and I'll pop that up again. Do you? Oh,
yes, they do get beak and feather disease. They're not as susceptible as sulphur-crested cockatoos. At the moment, I just mentioned one of our distinctive gang-gangs called White-Eye, and he's white-eyed because his feathers are going around his eye. So it may be fatal in a few cases, and one bird in Canberra did have to be put down because of beak and feather disease. So, yeah, it is important that people do use hygiene if they are feeding gang-gangs.
And the question there, will they use nest boxes?
Well, because we've found all the nesting hollows, we're actually working with our state government, and they've got climbers who have climbed up and measured the dimensions of the hollows. And we're actually trialling 90 nest tubes at the moment. There's no actual evidence that gang-gangs have ever used nest boxes. So if someone has one, I'd really like to hear about it. But, we've put 30 nest boxes in each of 3 places where gang-gangs are breeding to see whether they are using them. But actually, they seem pretty disinterested by the tubes. And like we say, we're not 100% sure that actually hollows are limiting for gang-gangs. But we really won't know until the end of this breeding season. So not till the end of November will we have a good idea about whether they're using boxes or not and designs to use.
Well, that's only natural for me to put out the call to Mick Callan from Habitat Innovation. Mick, have you ever seen a gang-gang in one of your artificial boxes? Let us know. I'll chase him up on Twitter, and Naomi, I will post that on Twitter and Facebook when I've heard from Mick.
Look, and the only other thing people need to know about gang-gangs is they're just a beautiful, spectacular bird, and they've just got such character. They really, they're not hassled by you so much, and it's amazing watching them interact and talking to each other and the way they feed. And, they're just a beautiful bird. So get out there and enjoy them.
I would second that. They are, well, all of the cockatoos are extremely interesting to watch, and I'll probably extend that to parrots, and hopefully Ellen's going to tell us a little bit about the Kaka in a minute, because they've been seen invading the suburbs again recently, and that's really good news.
And sorry, Brad, I do have to go. I've got to go and do some stirring to try and save gang-gang, so I'll leave you to it.
Well, good luck, Michael. If there's anything I can do on my platform to assist you, let us know, because we don't want to lose the battle with another amazing bird. That would be awful.
I'll be in touch. Thank you.
Great to meet you, Michael. And thanks for being on the Bird Emergency.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. There we go. Look how easy it is nowadays to do all these kind of things, Ellen. Now, while you're there, just let me. I've got to pull up the Forest and Birds site, and
I don't actually know if it's been updated yet. Sometimes it takes a little bit for the changes to come through.
No, that's okay, because I wanted to have all the contenders up here, which here we are, Bird of the Year. That's good. There's a bat there. Here we go. Here we go. There we are. So we'll just get that sharing so that people know what we're talking about. Welcome, Ellen, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, look, it's I love getting Kiwis on the show because you've got amazing birds, Fettingham. You guys have got amazing birds. And I don't know if you know, I'll bore people who have been part of the Bird Emergency since the beginning of my journey, but my very first Bird Emergency interview was with a Kiwi. Would you care to guess who it might have been?
I don't know. I think you just have to tell me.
Steph Burrell.
Oh,
amazing
brilliant.
Steph Burrell, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steph's been on a number of times. When I first spoke to her, she was at Georgia doing her stint at Georgia, and then we've talked to her again as BirdLife International, BirdLife Marine, beg your pardon, talking about mainly bycatch and birds getting hooked, but also the amazing birds of the. I always get the Gulf wrong, so you can tell me. It begins with H.
Gulf. Horaki.
Horaki. I always pronounce it terribly. Ellen, New Zealand Bird of the Year. Before we announce who won, let's have a look at the concept this year, which I liked. Underbirds are go. What's an underbird?
Well, that's a tricky question because I think so many of New Zealand's birds are underbirds in some way or another. But we decided to, high-tech algorithm, aka I put together a big spreadsheet of all of the candidates we had on our candidate list this year, and then I looked at how many votes they got in the previous 2 years, how many times they've been mentioned in the media, so we have media monitoring software where we can kind of look at that, and then also looked at their threat status and scored them based on those 3 metrics, and then came up with this list of 21 the most underbirdy of the underbirds, I guess.
Now, was it kind of the birds that people don't know so well, or was it that they are the perhaps the most threatened, or what was the weighting factor?
Well, it's kind of a combination of both. Like you'll see there's quite a few birds that are in serious trouble. But also there are some which you're not really going to encounter, most everyday New Zealanders will never encounter them, like the subantarctic snipe down on the subantarctic islands, or, the fern bird is really shy and sort of hides in thick, often wetland kind of vegetation. So definitely a combination of ones that are threatened, but also ones that New Zealanders probably didn't realise we had here.
Now, I have to take issue with this label for the Southern New Zealand dotterel. You've really underplayed it when you've said in serious trouble, haven't you? I mean, what are there? Less than 60 or less than 100 of them?
I think the last count there were 144.
Yeah, so I mean, we've done an episode on the Southern dotterel, and that one's pretty bleak, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
although amazingly resilient, the fact that it has kept hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have a look at some of these other underbirds. I mean, how cool is the wrybill,
Oh,
by the way?
so cool. Yeah.
And the black stilt. Now, the black stilt, how many do you estimate are left of the black stilt?
I believe there's about 170 wild adult birds. They do have a captive breeding program at the moment for them.
Yeah. You've been really proactive in New Zealand with the captive breeding programs. I mean, the Tuckahaya has been a fantastic success, I would say, in terms of captive breeding.
Mm.
I'm not sure that the habitat retention is quite as
Yeah.
successful, but you do have the fenced off predator-free reserves and whatnot to maintain those populations, don't you?
Yeah, that's a problem we're encountering now with Takahe and with Kakapo as well, because their population has doubled in the last few years. We're getting more and more of these birds, which is fantastic, but we don't have safe places to give them as homes.
Nowhere to put them, and that
yeah, nowhere to put them.
And and actually, let's talk about that. Actually, first thing, the reason the kakapo is not there is it's so popular and so well known, it would win every year, right? So it's now excluded.
Yeah, it's not a lifetime ban. We might bring it back because people do love a kakapo and we love kakapo. But you know, the ultimate purpose of Bird of the Year is to raise awareness for all of New Zealand's birds, not just the kakapo. And so it would kind of defeat the purpose if we had the same bird winning every year and us talking about the same things every year.
That's right. That's right. And let's just talk about some of the New Zealand birds that we've done a show on. We've done the where's the southern Fiordland
Oh, the
penguin. Why
Tawaki?
isn't he? There he is.
Yeah, there
There's
he
the
is.
Tawaki. I was looking for
Yeah.
him down there. We've done Tawaki. We've done Kakapo. We've done what did I just say? Southern Dotterel. I think that's where we're at so far. I think it's only 3. But you've got so many amazing birds. I just have to get more people on board. But I wanted to speak to you about. Oh, we still haven't let the cat out of the bag about who won. So let's leave that just a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Comments and questions welcome too, by the way. Barb, I can't believe you let the cat out of the bag. We'll let Barb's message be the announcement in a minute. But the Kaka, I noticed that it has been back in some suburbs recently. Now that was I saw that in some news feed I follow here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how much of a big deal has that been in New Zealand?
That particular news story, so about Kaka returning to a place in New Zealand called Taranaki, and I think it's taken off in the media in the last couple of weeks. It's got quite a bit of pickup, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, everyone's gone a bit feather-brained with Bird of the Year, and everyone loves a good news story. Great to have charismatic birds coming back into our neighbourhoods. And also, we don't really know where these particular kaka have come from. So where they have reinvaded the suburbs in other places like Wellington, they've come from a fenced sanctuary. So in Wellington, they've come from Zealandia. Dunedin, they're starting to sort of spread out from Orokonui fenced sanctuary. But in Taranaki, there isn't really a nearby place. So it's a bit of a mystery where they've sort of turned up from. So I think that's another reason why it's taken off.
Is there enough historical knowledge about the kaka to know how far they would have ranged in times gone by? Like they may be quite a wide ranging and nomadic species anyway.
Possibly. I'm not sure about that. I think that's something I'd have to go and look up and see what the research says. But they do, go pretty far, especially for a New Zealand bird, because they can fly, whereas lots of New Zealand birds don't really fly that much. So yeah, I definitely think they are a bit more nomadic, but I guess, it's just surprising because there doesn't seem to be a nearby place where they have specifically come from.
So for people who aren't really familiar with the situation in New Zealand, and God forbid they haven't already listened to an episode of the Bird Emergency talking about a New Zealand bird, you can go and listen to the one about the kakapo with Dr. Andrew Digby. What a bunch of heroes they are! That the recovery team for the kakapo, going way back. Such determination and doggedness and learning the lessons. But you just touched on the problem that I'm all riled up about. People are probably sick to death of me carping about it on Twitter. I've been carping about it. Look, it's great to have captive populations and captive breeding programs. They're essential. But seriously, what's the bloody point if, like you've got with Takahe, all of a sudden you've worked out how to breed them and to build up a population from 60 to 6,000 and there's nowhere to put them? What's the point? Are we going to have every bird in a zoo, for crying out loud? And the fact that none of it seems like policies are not made with any logical extension of what if we're wildly successful, what do we do then? And you guys have got a massive challenge because you've got the fence sanctuaries. Now we're going down that way here, but then you get bozos going, hey, well, we've worked out how to do fence sanctuaries and everything. Let's reanimate the Tasmanian tiger. You get a couple of bloody Hollywood dickheads come in and go, whoa, let's do that. And go, no, how about we stop wrecking the joint? How about we do that first?
Yeah.
Can we just stop wrecking the joint and then try and fix it up bit by bit? Oh, no, let's get millions of dollars in some, and feasibly it's possible. Yeah, but I actually like the birds we've got now. I like bettongs and patamelons and antechinus's. I prefer to see them rather than what are they going to do if they recreate 2 or 3 thylacines? Can bet your life they're not going to let them into the wilderness of southwest Tasmania. They'll be in a bloody zoo so they can charge $100 to spend 5 minutes with it and get your photo taken in front of a glass enclosure. The whole lot is bloody bullshit. And you guys have to put up with stoats and weasels and then our monster birds that we've allowed to get over there, and possums. Possums are killing all your birds.
Even unexpected things like we have hedgehogs, and they can do quite a bit of damage in terms of eating native bird eggs, and also with the southern dotterels, deer have been recorded eating the eggs of southern dotterels. So
now, did you? I'm guessing you didn't hear my southern dotterel show.
No.
Okay, we talked about the southern dotterel, and in the course of the conversation, it's the Invercargill rugby union team, I think, called the Stags.
Okay, yep.
Okay. And I just thought, that's a bit insane, isn't it? Invasive foreign species that is causing all sorts of problems, and your local sports team is using them. Why aren't they the dotterels? Right. And somebody reached out, and there are now discussions about the appropriateness of using the stag as the emblem, the iconic emblem of a sports team. So I'd be really I'd be really interested to see where that goes. But to me, that's just a no-brainer. I mean, there should be people campaigning against that. It's like going, "Oh, we're the feral cats." Fuck off, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't warn you in advance, Erin. As Barb well knows, I do get a bit sweary sometimes. Not safe
That's
for
all
work.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's let Barb have her moment in the sun. Come on. What? Where is it? It's not coming up. There we go.
Very-
The rock Wren. Okay, now I
Yes.
can bring this back in the stream. I can go back and find, because it looks like it hasn't been
Yeah.
done.
Updated.
Where is the rock Wren? I'm not on the Underbirds, am I? No, I'm on all of them. So let's go rock Wren and find it, and let's learn about the rock Wren together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, something's not playing nice. There we are. Rock Wren. Tell us about the rock Wren. Look, I don't even want to go with that one because
Yeah. Piwowo, which means little complaining bird.
and I'm waiting for the complaining.
Did you? There we go.
Yes. I hope people can hear that.
Good test to see if you need hearing aids. So high pitched.
Yeah, it is very high pitched. Yeah, it is. It's real squeaky. You know what that reminds me of? I don't know. You were probably not a crazy birder in your childhood. I had a little wooden thing, little capsule, I guess it was, painted red with like a little screw in between. And if you turned it, it went. It's a bird caller thing.
Yeah.
It was that sort of high pitched. So let's get the rock wren up there. Nice photo from Craig McKenzie.
Yeah.
And how's your plant knowledge? Is that an indige plant, or is that something like a Dracaena or
My
something
plant
else?
knowledge is not great. I would probably imagine it's indigenous, though, just because of where rock wrens live. I'm not sure that there's many weeds or introduced species up that high.
Does the rock wren visit gardens, or tell us about
No.
it? It's in
So,
serious trouble.
yes,
So,
the rock
here we
wren
go.
is a kind of a mini mountaineer. So they're New Zealand's only true alpine bird species. They live their entire lives above the bushline, sort of up in the scree and scrub of the Southern Alps. And as you can see, they don't really have a tail, but they have these long legs with these almost like snowshoe feet, and then little talons. The talons look like crampons almost, so good for gripping onto rocks and ice and snow. And they don't fly super well, so they're not great at dispersal from across the landscape.
Yep.
But they kind of bob and hop across the rocks. And yeah, super
Now,
cute.
for Australians, they're reminiscent in their looking front on to a scrub wren, but they have a much shorter tail than a scrub wren.
Yep.
I wonder what their taxonomy tells us, like who they're closely related to.
They're part of a New Zealand wren family, which is actually very ancient. So I'm not sure that they would be closely related to the scrub wren, despite them looking a bit similar. So there were 7, I think, wren species in this sort of unique endemic wren family about 1,000 years ago, and now we only have 2 left, which is the rock wren and the rifleman.
And are they true wrens, or are they like an old world family, not a new world family, like the true wrens? above your pay grade?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. Have to go and look.
I haven't got any idea either. But I'm going to guess that being an Antipodean. Oh my God! Sorry, I've just got the most block user. Sorry, you're out of here. You get some ridiculous things coming to the chat sometimes. Luckily, they don't all make the screen, and those ones certainly couldn't make the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So would they be? Are they in the same habitat as the southern dotterel?
Even higher. So,
but would they overlap like at times of the year? Do you think?
Well, I don't know if there are any rock wrens on Stewart Island where the southern dotterels are relegated to now, but possibly there would have been some overlap when the southern dotterels lived on mainland New Zealand. I think the rock wren is kind of about 900 meters up, and I think from memory there were some southern dotterels recorded breeding above the 900 mark as well, so there would have been some overlap.
Okay, let's talk about the Bird of the Year competition.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope that the competition achieves each year? And I mean, give us an idea of when it started and what it's become.
Yeah, so it started 17 years ago, back in 2005. And at that point in New Zealand, there was quite a fierce election going on with two,
that would have been a Piggy Muldoon election, wouldn't it?
Oh, no, that was even further back. So this was Helen Clark and I think Don Brash.
Okay, yes, we remember Helen Clark. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So big election, and so Forest and Bird decided to do an election of their own, run through their flagship magazine.
Hang on, let's get that right. We know politics and elections are boring crap, and none of you really give a shit. So we're doing a bird election. Is that kind of what?
Okay, yeah, Bird of the Year. So it was just run through the magazine, which goes out to Forest and Bird members and supporters. And I'm not sure exactly when it shifted to being online, but I imagine it would have been late 2000s. And has just really grown from there since it went online, and with social media exploding as well, grown exponentially.
I love that. I mean, that's just so Fred Dagg, isn't it? All right, we've got a bloody election. Who gives us stuff? Let's run our own election about birds. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, I can just imagine John Clark actually being on the committee that put that together. That's cool. So, has it built a lot of awareness? I mean, I've been following it, and looks like I thought Ariel was going to join us and talk about Team Cookie, but she's driving in between, so obviously she's missed out. Commiserations, yep. Ariel, you didn't get Cook's Petrol over the line, but has it been? Does it get mainstream coverage? Like, is it something that the three idiots on the couch talking breakfast TV stuff are going,
yep.
Oh, look what's happening in Bird of the Year?
Yes, absolutely. I was on one of those exact shows this morning talking about the rock wren. So, yeah, it's really broken through into the mainstream and become this sort of cultural phenomenon. So not just in New Zealand, like I've done radio interviews in the past 2 weeks from like our state broadcaster RNZ through to more like the Breeze type one. So all sorts of media gets behind it. But then it's also even gone even further to the BBC. I was on live BBC radio.
I did hear.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware it was you because it was on overnight on BBC World that I heard it, and I thought, damn it, I wish I could have got in first. I think we'd already organised to talk about this, but no, damn it.
Yeah, and Washington Post. So it gets a lot of attention.
I'm surprised we don't do something like that here.
Well, you do have a Bird of the Year that is kind of a rip-off of New Zealand's one.
Yeah, but it's nothing like the prominence and as well organised. I mean, we've got but I guess there's so many competing things. I mean, we've got the Birds in Backyards counts and Birds in Backyards always ongoing, and then we've got the Aussie Bird Count, which is only wrapped up a week or so back.
Yeah.
And that's part of National Bird Week. But we don't have, as part of National Bird Week, the crowning of the Bird of the Year. And I guess the sense is that you don't want one to detract from the other, because the bird count is gathering really important information for management and other decisions. So you don't want to be devaluing one for the other.
Yeah. We do also in New Zealand have similar things. We have a garden bird survey and the Great Kereru Count. So we do also have other things that take up people's bird attention, but they don't overlap.
Yep. While I've got you, let's talk about the pigeon. I'm going to look. The only reason I'm not having a go is because I don't want to insult anyone with my terribly Aussie Aussie pronunciation of all the Maori names. I need to practice and practice and practice. But your Kereru is a pigeon. Is it closely allied? Do you know? And I'm only asking you because you've spent time in Canberra and whatnot studying here. Do you know if it's closely allied to any of the Australian pigeons?
I'm not sure. Possibly.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the brown fruit dove without being brown, but it looks a lot like that in its body shape. But beautiful coloration.
Beautiful colours. Quite bulky and makes this kind of sound when it's flying because it's so heavy.
Yeah. Oh well, but a lot of pigeons have that sort of flappy wing sound. So yeah, they're a beauty. Who, you can probably say this now because it's all over. Who were you hoping would win?
I didn't really mind. I thought both, so there were kind of two front runners at the end, which was the rock wren and the little penguin, and I would have been happy with either of them as Bird of the Year champions. Yeah, I've never really. I love them all. It's like asking who your favorite child is, like, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But there's only one seat left in the lifeboat, right? So
no.
Actually, the little penguin, that's a really interesting one. We did have a bit of a discussion when I was talking with Ursula about the Tawaki. And when I was growing up, and I had a couple of, I don't know if you'll ever remember this. Remember, I think it was one of the motoring organisations, we call it the RACV or the NRMA over here. They put out a 2-volume handbook of the birds of New Zealand. Did you ever see that little spiral bound thing? I got given that when I was a kid because one of my uncles worked in New Zealand for a number of years, and he sent these over to me for Christmas one year. And so they had all these really cool New Zealand birds, and I was really, really into it. And I've forgotten where I was going. Oh, yeah. So little penguins, it was just assumed to be a subspecies of the Australian little penguin. But I think now you have got a little penguin and a fairy penguin. One of them is a subspecies of the Australian penguin, which I always grew up calling a fairy penguin, but I think now we call it a little penguin.
Yeah.
And the other one is a distinct penguin. So
I think, from my understanding, the little penguins or fairy penguins or little blue penguins, korora, started in New Zealand, went across to Australia, and then some have come back, and I think those are the white-flippered little penguins. But could be wrong, but I think there's New Zealand origin going to Australia and then some coming back to somewhere in New Zealand.
I'm just getting my 2 bird books out because one is quite a deal older than the other. So one of them says we have the little penguin in Australia and is not mentioning any other penguin. And now if I go to the Bible, which is the Australian Bird Guide, I no longer memorize every bird that's in my bird books like I did when I was a kid. So I'll see what it tells me, and I'm happy to be guided by that. Little penguin. So it's common. Doesn't say anything about New Zealand.
So Wikipedia, source of all good things, says that there is the little penguin from New Zealand, and then there's the Australian little penguin, which is found in Australia, and then also some in the Otago region of New Zealand. So that's that population that's come back.
That's right. They're on one side of the country, and the other species is on the other coast, on the Pacific coast, rather than the Tasman Sea coast. I think that's what Ursula and I were discussing. I think that's how we got there. Well, so you've got much more penguins than us. I think you've got 8 breeding species from memory in New Zealand, and 11 or 13 that occur in New Zealand waters, including the subantarctic, the Antarctic waters. Did I get those numbers right?
Sounds about right.
Yeah, good. Good memory. Penguins are cool, and you guys have got so many penguins. How many? I'm going to throw. Look, hey, this is like special species. Albatross, our special subject in tonight's New Zealand Mastermind. How many albatross have you got hanging around in New Zealand?
I'm quite a few. I wouldn't. I don't know what the number is.
That's right. The correct answer is lots. Yeah. That's right. Got to get over there and do some watching. I don't know if you saw on Twitter. You probably weren't watching. My new camera turned up in the mail today, but my lenses aren't here yet, so I can't play with it yet. But
it's exciting.
So well, I reckon now I'm going to have to book the trip to New Zealand. I've been waiting because I thought, well, I'll get the camera, then I'll go. No. Okay, gang. So while we have Ellen Rykers from Forest and Bird New Zealand here, and if you have any New Zealand bird questions or a comment that you would like to make about how cool New Zealand birds are, you have that chance. I want to ask you, Ellen, that annoying kid that's on all the ads over here now, he's a young man now, but he starred in a movie where Sam, I think it was Sam Neill, and him were looking for a bird. What was that bird? Why is that interesting?
I think the movie is
now, isn't it?
Is a Hunt for the Wilder People. They might have been looking for were they looking for the moa?
No. They were looking for a. Let me look it up while we're on here. I think that's it. Is that a?
That's an extinct bird.
Yeah,
one of many.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, this is it. Hunt for the. Of course, it doesn't tell us about the bird. Julian Dennison. That's the
The
kid.
actor. Mhm.
It's not telling me anything about the story. That's annoying. But yeah, looking for an extinct bird which he was sure still existed, and of course he found it. I mean, in the happy story. How many of the extinctions,
Mhm.
and of course we're having a general discussion here. I know we don't know exactly, but how many do you think are attributable to the pest species, the stoats, the ferrets, the hedgehogs, the brush-tailed
Mm.
possums, and how many may be attributable to sort of habitat loss, like
Yeah. I think probably the vast majority are driven by those. Well, it's kind of a. Now that I think about it, it's kind of both. But
yeah.
there's one extinct bird species, which was the Lyell's wren, and so that was also one of the birds in the same ancient wren family as the rock wren. It was found on an island in the Marlborough Sound, so at the top of the South Island of New Zealand. And in the late, maybe in the 1890s, there was a lighthouse keeper on the island, and he brought over a cat, and that cat had kittens.
Oh,
And so that is one species where we absolutely know
exactly what knocked it
extinction
off.
was attributable to
Oh,
cats. Um,
oh,
yeah, I think we even know the name of that cat. If I look at it,
oh,
it was called something like
oh, Roger.
Mrs. Mrs. Dibble or something like
Oh, Mrs. Dibble.
um, Tibbles.
Oh well, that's very Doc Martinish, isn't it? It was nearly Mrs. Tishel. So, oh, so this is why. I mean, knowing everything that we know now, this is why I get so angry about. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you saw what our new government that we all thought. Oh, thank God, we've got some people who actually give a shit
Mm,
back in charge. And then what do they unveil? A pathetic, probably compromised offset system and an amount of money which over 10 years,
excuse me.
bless you. So and they've got, oh, we're going to put all this money into it, but the amount of money over 10 years is only 4 times what they're giving to rebuild an ice cream factory that was flooded in
Jesus.
the recent floods.
Yeah.
So when you match it up like that, we got 2,000 endangered species. We've got a pledge for no more extinctions, but we're going to give you 4 times the amount to rebuild an ice cream factory over
Mm.
10 years. It's the biggest pile of stinking bloody the stuff you scrape off your shoe that I've ever seen. And I don't know. What do we do, Ellen? I mean, you guys have got it in some ways so much worse because of the feral. I mean, you've got cats and foxes.
No
And possum.
foxes,
Oh,
just
no
cats.
foxes. Beg your
Yeah.
pardon.
Yeah.
Just cats and stoats and ferrets and weasels and
Hmm.
and mice and rats and all those, or everything else that we've got concentrated, far more endemic. No, probably that's probably not right. But far more concentrated and probably isolated populations than we do. I would guess. Um, and you guys have actually got a pest-free New Zealand policy that I think I mean, everyone's on board with that, aren't there? I mean, there isn't like 30% of the population going, oh no, pest free New Zealand wants to microchip us. You know, no, you haven't got 30% of the country being lunatic and going, no, let's not preserve our animals and birds, have you?
No, I think there's pretty wide support for the idea of predator-free 2050, but where there's a lot of debate and controversy is how we get there.
How to do it, yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, they're discussions that everyone's got to have because there'll be some things that work and some things that don't work, and strategies will be adapted over time. Let's find something good. What's worked really well? Takahe, Kakapo look like they are secure in that they're unlikely to go extinct. Whether they can successfully re-establish beyond your island arcs is a different question. And also, that's a mainstay idea of the federal government here. Let's do island arcs. So what they're doing is saying, it's okay. We'll continue to stuff up the mainland because we've got some islands that we can put shit on. Didn't you watch Jurassic Park, you morons? No fair income. Anyway, while I'm not against island arcs, it should not be your mainstay policy, should it? I mean, surely if you've got populations in intact habitats, surely you preserve that and at the same time maintain an island arc insurance population and a captive breeding population. It's kind of like walking and chewing gum at the same time, but I don't know. So what are some of the successes? We've said Takahe, Kakapo. What else? Kakarikis, are they on the rebound?
Not so much. They're mostly still on offshore islands. The kaki as well, even though that's still only 170 wild adults, that's a lot better than the 20 or so that were left in the 1980s. And then, of course, there's the classic, which is the Chatham Island black robin. Have you heard about that story?
No. Have we got the Chatham Island black robin in the?
It should be on here. Yes, it came fourth.
Okay. Well, we haven't got the results up, so I've got to go through everyone. Tom Tit. I love the Tom Tit.
Yeah.
Kokako. Let's briefly, while we look for the Chatham Island robin, Kokako, North Island, South Island, which was the one that got rediscovered and looks like it's bounced back?
So the North Island kōkako is doing all right. The South Island kōkako was classified as extinct, but is now data deficient. Well, questionable.
So are we? Look, for those of you who don't know, there were a couple of records, and someone is very confident that they were seeing one or two of them somewhat frequently. So are those records in doubt? Are they?
I think people were just like, we don't have enough evidence. They're probably extinct. Is the feeling of some people. I definitely have hope. I want to believe that they are still out there. I've
been trying to organise an interview about that for a couple of years, and waxing and waning on how keen they are to talk. But yeah, all right. This is the black robin we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, let's have a listen. I love that you've got the bird calls up here as well for the contenders. I reckon that adds a lot, and it's really educational for people who think, oh, I reckon I've heard that in my garden. Well, 99% of the time they're probably wrong, but it just I'm really keen on people just listening and being aware of what's around them all the time. I think that helps. sometimes
Um,
birds are probably found where we don't think they're occurring, just because nobody cares, nobody's
mhm,
listening, nobody's
mhm.
looking. So yeah, tell us about the black robin. Is it related to our Australian robins?
Probably. I think
Probably.
so.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's an old world flycatcher. So
that sounds about
cool.
right, but don't
Cool.
quote me on that.
No,
But
no, and also don't take whatever I say about this as gospel either. I mean,
um, black
I,
robins, though.
I'm just a podcast host, right? I'm as
um,
knowledgeable on this shit as Ben Shapiro, right?
hopefully a bit more.
Actually, no, I reckon I know more about birds than Ben Shapiro. I don't
Yeah.
know as much about fascism. Actually, I probably do. I did do economic history of the Nazis, so I probably know about that too. So sorry, Ben. Anyway,
Black
sorry.
Robin. Black Robin.
Sorry, Al.
Yeah, so back in the late 70s, early 80s, there were just 5 left and only one female called Old Blue, and now there are around 250.
Now that raises a thought for
Questions
me.
about inbreeding?
Well, yeah, it's like
Mm,
you know, back then, the genetic typing and whatnot just wasn't available. Certainly not.
mm.
It certainly wouldn't have been affordable. So, how important? Have you got a bird call on your phone? I
I do.
love
My
that.
ringtone
Which
is
one?
the saddleback.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you had any reason to doubt how much of a bird nerd Ellen is, that has just put it beyond doubt. You are off the scale. Well done. Well done. Uh, Look, I love that. Now, getting back to something serious, how diverse do we? I'm assuming that work has been done every time you capture a bird. I'm assuming there's monitoring projects and people are doing mist netting and capturing and weighing and
Yeah.
taking fecal samples and all the stuff that is done. How diverse is this population?
So I think that they're very closely monitoring it. One interesting thing they found is that there are some um, alleles, I think, so some genes that were basically not present that suggested they had been through a similar population bottleneck before. And so some of those genes that could have been not good with inbreeding had kind of dropped out. Um, so I think something that the people managing the population um, keep a very close eye on, more so than they did back when there were only 5. And same with the kakapo as well, really careful matching
Mm.
of genes.
Uh, that that's what I've been so impressed with, the way that um, recovery project has gone, and the way it has gone into a management um, project as much as a recovery project. I think it's been
Yeah.
really interesting. And how good does Andrew Digby do with his communication? I mean,
Oh,
that's
fantastic. Yeah.
uh, hats off to everyone that's been involved in that. And it's a small team. All those volunteers who get involved, all the people who are doing the monitoring, the research students. Really, really great that that's been able to keep going. But how many bird species in New Zealand require that kind of dedication, do you think, Ellen?
Um, but we've talked about what 4 so far
Yeah.
that kind of have that kind of dedication, and another one would be the shore plover, that also has about 250-ish birds, and the fairy tern as well has about 40 or so birds. So, but there's probably more that need that sort of attention but don't have it.
I'm just looking for, where's the shore plover? Now, when I look at the bittern,
Mhm.
now Is your bittern a subspecies of the Australasian bittern, or is it a
Yeah,
separate
it's the
species?
same as it's the
Okay,
Australasian
okay,
bittern. Yeah.
okay. And of course we've got shining bronze cuckoos, so I'm guessing that they're the same bird, because don't they migrate across the Tasman?
Yeah, they migrate up between the Pacific Islands and then
Yeah.
further south. So
Yeah. So that's right. Where am I? What am I looking for? I forgot even what I'm looking for now.
sort of with
There we
there
are.
it
Shore
is.
plover.
Yeah.
Shore plover. Now, what a cool looking. It's a what we would have called a dotterel. I would have guessed in the old days. What what do we know about this? In serious trouble. One of the rarest shorebirds. Is it rarer than the southern dotterel?
No, southern dotterel, 144. Shore plover is about 250.
Okay, and where will people possibly see one?
So they were sort of relegated to the Chatham Islands, which were quite far east of
Yeah.
mainland New Zealand. But there's now a captive breeding population somewhere in the North Island, and there's a couple of sort of reintroduced populations in an island on the Hauraki Gulf and sort of in Hawke's Bay area. I think they also tried to do a population on Mana Island near Wellington, but someone came onto the island in their private boat and had a rat on board, and the rat, yeah, yeah.
And actually, let's talk about that. I had a conversation with someone one day who, when I was up in Queensland, and was bitching about that they couldn't go to an island that they wanted to go to. It was restricted for research, blah, blah, blah. That's exactly why. That's
Yeah.
why. Because you don't know if you've got a mouse or a rat in your forward compartment that you've never looked at in the last 15 years. You never cleaned it out properly. This stuff happens, and it's entirely foreseeable. And just because you want to go somewhere, it doesn't mean you should. So come on, people. Okay. Ellen, I've got another question that I think people might ask about if they're not familiar with Aotearoa, New Zealand. Actually, I'm not sure. Has New Zealand formally adopted the dual nomenclature yet? That's on the cards, isn't it?
It is on the cards. It's not formally adopted yet, but it's very widespread.
I try and do it, but I do forget. But I do try and do it. And again, I know Aotearoa is probably a really bad pronunciation, but for the moment, until I do my mouth exercises, that's about as good as anyone's going to get. I do like the way New Zealand is accepting and recognizing. I'm choosing my words carefully because I certainly don't think that everything's solved, but yeah, I do like that the two heritages are coming together and trying to find some common ground. Be nice if we did a bit more of that here. We've got BirdLife Australia, which is the bird body sort of here. Now, what's the relationship? Forest and Bird is a government department. Yeah.
Nope.
No.
It's an independent environmental organisation. We don't take money from government. We're basically a charity. So, yeah.
Okay. So no. I thought there was a crossover or an alliance with DOC, Department of Conservation. So there we go. That just shows I haven't read enough. I thought it was a little bit of an adjunct, like an independent but semi-government body. No. So that's okay. Cool. Okay, because I was going to ask, is there BirdLife New Zealand? No, that's you, right?
Yep. We're
You're affiliated with BirdLife International.
yes, so Steph Burrell
Yep.
is under the Forest and Bird umbrella as her BirdLife as the BirdLife representative.
Cool. How stupid of me not to have even twigged to that, because I should have had Steph in here as well. Wow. I'm almost, well, I'm lost for words a bit because the challenge of preserving seabirds, and New Zealand has so many breeding seabirds as well as seabirds that occur in the waters. That's a massive challenge, but they're really different problems that are presented compared to your land-based birds. How do you get most of the funding for the awareness part of the activities? Because I'm guessing, and I'm asking you to confirm or deny that the funding for the actual conservation efforts largely comes from the government through the Department of Conservation, and that most of the communication work is done by people like yourself. Is that?
I think the Department of Conservation has a huge role to play in delivering on the ground conservation efforts, but they do also do a lot of communication. They have a podcast called Sounds of Science. They've had a threatened species ambassador whose job was to just talk about cool threatened species.
Who is that?
I'm not sure who that is anymore. It used to be Nicola Tukey, who is actually now the chief executive of Forest and Bird. Okay. So definitely the Department of Conservation does both a huge amount. But because they are a government agency, I guess we kind of play the role of calling out when things need to be called out. We do also have conservation projects on the ground where we're doing predator control, habitat restoration. So I guess Forest and Bird is a little bit different to a lot of environmental NGOs because we do that on the ground stuff and the advocacy and lobbying. So
when I'm probably going into too much detail that probably people aren't that interested in, but I certainly am. How is the interplay or the cooperation between the two? Because at some points you're going to be an adversary in that you're going to be saying, look, you're really not doing enough here. You're not either doing enough or you're not doing the right way, or the allocation of resources are a bit skewed or whatever. So there's always going to be conflict, but I'm guessing that it's almost always a hand-in-hand approach, that you are amplifying the strengths of the other.
I think so. I think that Forest and Bird wants to see the Department of Conservation thrive and do really good work. And so that's kind of our approach. But then, calling out when necessary. And often that's not necessarily directed at the Department of Conservation, but more just at government in general.
Yeah, because as we all know, we're not stupid. We all know that the competition for resources is intense, and it always is. And that's really why we need to always be vocal and never accepting that. Well, I'm guessing it's the same in New Zealand. They can always find money for something like a subsidising sport, or encouraging some person to start a new tourism venture or something, and they'll always find money for that, but they won't find money for the New Zealand Bird of the Year. The rock wren. Hey, Ellen, it's been cool.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Been great to chat.
I'm glad to have found you. What's sort of next on Forests and Birds item in the year? So no doubt next week everyone will have forgot Bird of the Year, and Ariel and everyone else will be going, we have to win next year. We have to win next year. How do we lift our game to win next year?
Yeah.
But what's the next priority for Forest and Bird?
So we have a couple of big campaigns that have actually, one of them's kind of kicked off in the middle of Bird of the Year. So there's currently a bill up in Parliament. Fun fact: New Zealand's bills for like members' bills in Parliament are drawn out of an old biscuit tin, and that's how they get chosen. Yeah. So it's just a lucky dip if your bill gets chosen or not.
Oh, so that would be like the private
members bill.
bill. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So there's one currently coming up to ban new mines on conservation land and end coal mining on all land by 2025. And so we are really pushing hard for that because rewinding back to 2010, there was a massive protest against the then government's plans to open up national parks to mining. And
now,
so
was that John Key?
Yeah.
And he's had a bit of a he suddenly realised that maybe being a dick isn't the best way to go, and so well done, John Key. Late to the party, but good on you. And actually, let me just say that how ridiculous is it that we're even discussing new mines in conservation land? We have the same kind of stupid discussions here. The reason it's conservation land is because it's important and we don't want to wreck it. But iron ore,
it's just beggars belief, really. So back in 2010, we had 40,000 people marching down the main street in Auckland saying we don't want mining in our national parks, and Jacinda Ardern was among them, and she had this big sign that said "Ours, not mines." And then in 2017, when she became Prime Minister, in the speech from the throne, which is kind of like the vision for what she wants to achieve, she said there will be no new mines on conservation land. And now 5 years later, we still have mining activity on conservation land and we still have permits being approved.
And that's because money talks, and that's why we have to keep squealing and bitching and moaning and figuratively bashing people around the ears with the words that they've said. They either mean it or they don't. And money talks, and
we do have we've made a replica of this massive banner that was in the 2010 protests, which says "No mining, pure New Zealand," and it's going on a tour around at the moment to places in New Zealand where conservation land is threatened by mining. So we've been to like a place recently where there's a proposed gold mine in the habitat of a critically endangered frog species, and down to like this amazing plateau on the west coast of the South Island, which just has this really special rare ecosystem, and they want to dig that up for coal. And so taking this banner around and kind of saying, hey, Prime Minister, you made a promise. Now you have a chance to fulfill it. So come on, let's do it.
Ellen, let's do a show about that and get some other people on to talk about the different areas, and maybe we can highlight some of the particular species that are at risk. And it doesn't only have to be birds, but let's do that.
Sounds great.
Because this is the kind of bullshit that just has to stop. She's either serious or she's not, and I've got no particular axe to grind against Jacinda Ardern, but you either mean it or you don't. And if you don't mean it, well then wear it, own it, and start up a joint venture company with Twiggy Forest or something, and and dig baby dig or drill baby drill, whatever it is. But anyway, so I had another question, but it's completely gone out of my brain. What can someone who's in New Zealand, who's just stumbled across the bird emergency and gone, my God, I need to get involved and help Ellen and all of her colleagues out. What's the best way somebody can make a difference for birds in New Zealand?
Join Forest and Bird. It's New Zealand's biggest environmental organisation and the oldest. We're turning 100 next year. We are the voice for nature, and there's a range of different ways you can get involved, whether it's finding your local branch and seeing what they're doing in terms of predator control or other projects, or we have youth hubs as well so that young people can get involved. There's just all kinds of amazing activities happening all across the country to do with forest and bird. But if that's not an option, then go out and buy a backyard trap and set up a trap in your backyard and help bring the birds back to your own garden.
Now, what's the target species for the trap? Is it the stoat and the weasel, or is it a cat, or is it a rat?
Mostly rats.
Mostly rats.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So there's still have you got both kinds?
Yeah, we've got.
Have you got the shit rat and the really, really shit rat?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So the black rat and the brown rat.
Yeah.
Sorry, they're all bad, aren't they? It's just amazing how much you've got to deal with in New Zealand. Now, if someone's not in New Zealand and they want to help out, what should they do? Apart from listen to all the bird emergency episodes about New Zealand birds.
I think you can still contribute to Forest and Bird through, we often have petitions and submissions that are up, or if you have the means to financially contribute, join. Or, there are programs for all different species. If you have a particular species that you like, I see that the kakapo recovery team has just opened up adoptions for kakapo, so you can adopt a kakapo symbolically, of course. You don't get to keep it.
I think from memory, isn't that you? No, it's not the plushie. You can buy a plushie, I think, of the kakapo. I thought they give you an adoption certificate, but there's also like a plushie that represents your kakapo. Your kakapo, I think. It's a long time since I looked at that, but that's pretty cool. I want to get a plushie. I want to get a bird emergency plushie, but I can't decide which bird to be the plushie, or whether I should have a Frankenstein plushie. The head of an albatross, the body of a Bali starling, the wings of an orange-bellied parrot, and the and the legs of a little kiwi or something like that. Cool. Well, Ellen,
thank you.
Been great. It's been great to meet you. Don't nick off yet. Let me just do what I have to do. I'm still trying to get to 500 on YouTube, but they have opened up the community tab. So much more of what I'll be doing will actually be happening on YouTube. Not moving away from the podcast, but doing more on YouTube. I also need money to pay off the camera I just bought. So you can buy me a coffee. That's easy to find. Buymeacoffee.com bird emergency, or like I've always got an easy link, the birdemergency.com/coffee. We were talking about gang-gangs earlier on. So remember that I put a spelling error in here. If you know of a hollow, or you've been seeing any interesting feeding behaviour or anything about GangGang Cockatoos, redhillregenerators.org.au. Red Hill's got a double L, just so you get it right. Help Michael and his group out on that one. I think that's all I wanted to push. Oh no, I did want to continue to push Rump Roo Eri. You can go to thebirdemergency.com/redrumps and you will find Rob Ashworth's Citizen Science Project to identify all of the hollows for the red rump parrot in Australia, if we can find them. And of course, always do your birds in backyard surveys. I didn't mention Holly couldn't be with us because she's writing a grant application and the deadline's really, really, really soon. And because the government doesn't give bird conservation organisations enough money and they have to continually go back and beg for more. So I hope you're having a great day, Holly. Maybe Holly was watching while she was filling in her submission. I don't know. Next week, I know I actually have my 6 monthly or something cancer check next Monday. So next Monday is going to not be on Monday. It's going to be on a different day. So, Alan, I'm looking forward to doing more about mining in New Zealand and conservation lands, and even maybe helping you have 100-year celebration. Thanks, everyone who's been watching on all the platforms again. Thanks for your contributions. Thanks so much, Barb, for ruining the surprise. But there we go. The Rock Wren, bird of the year in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Ellen Rykers from Forest and Bird New Zealand. Thanks so much for joining us. This has been the Bird Emergency. I'm Grant. I'm a bird nerd. Oh, and let me just remind you, make a note of those Twitter handles and hashtag Toonda. That's somewhere behind me where I can't get out of the way. But don't let them bugger up the habitat again, please. So there we are. Out of here. Let's do a wave. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Alan. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
See ya.
And remember, thebirdemergency.com/live. You can always find all the live streams, and just about every interview I do is there. See you later.